Welcome back, everyone, for another week of the 1867 Sports Show. Tonight, we are on episode Dylan Brooks plus Dwight Powell,
Which isn't enough on the scoreboard, apparently.
which isn't enough on the scoreboard, but it does add up to 31. Kyle Skinner, how are we doing tonight, buddy?
Uh, I'm doing better than our Canadian in general basketball program is because talk about coming in with the highest of highs. And part of me always knew that like we were pumping their tires a little bit much for a program that hasn't exactly shone on the greatest of stages. But I didn't think that we would be coming home, not just men, not just women, but even the women's 3-on-3, who was very
Yeah,
ranked as well, completely shut out of medals. So
yeah,
I'm doing better than them. Let's put it that way.
yeah. Yeah, and for anyone who watched the game today between Canada and France in the men's basketball quarterfinal, yeah, I think disappointment is the ultimate word of the day because I think with the way that they came out so sluggish, especially against the home nation, you knew that again, we'll take officiating away because people can say what they want. Referees had a very big disparity between free throws for Canada and France, but you know that they're going to have favoritism in regards to whistles. Like it's just going to happen. It's human nature, and especially for officials or whoever it is to feed off of energy in a crowd, just like a player would, right? If a call is made and it's favored towards the home team, crowd cheers. What happens when the crowd cheers? Adrenaline starts to go up, right? So it's just a natural thing. But the way that they came out, and again, it was a tale of one quarter because if you look at the rest of the game, Canada actually outplayed France in quarter 2, 3, and 4. But if you look at that first quarter, where it was a 24-10 at the end, that's ultimately what cost you the game. And you cannot come out in international play when the quarters are shorter, the games are shorter, and really, you're not having these high scoring games. So you got to make sure you're locked in from, the tip off to the time that the final horn blows.
Yeah. And that's just the thing, right? Is for anyone who's never watched, first of all, FIBA basketball, uh, no surprise. Like
No.
those who have actually watched international basketball, this is what you are to expect. Like you think NBA reffing is suspect at times. No, 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 my friend. Just you get ready for anything that starts with an F. FIFA, FIBA, any of these larger conglomerate associations. Yeah, it gets a little dicey on the world stage. So
Yeah.
I'm not even going to entertain the thought of, oh, the refs cost us the game. Okay, well, you know
No.
what? If that's your big takeaway from it, then that just shows that you tune into international basketball once every 4 years. Aside from that, though, like it truly is not an indictment, but kind of shows how much this roster was reliant on guard play. And when the shots weren't falling, because our good friend Jamal Murray had an
Mm-hmm.
absolutely atrocious day from the field.
Atrocious tournament overall.
Wow, I mean, we can deep dive on him because even going back to the NBA playoffs here with Denver, like his
Yeah.
legs were just shot at that point.
Yeah.
And I would not be at all surprised if, Team Canada has quietly been keeping something under wraps in terms of a larger kind of nagging injury, just because, Jamal wanted to participate here. But something is amiss because he has absolutely zero lift in his shots. He is absolutely not the player who can get by his defender with that quick burst first step that you saw during some of those Nuggets playoff runs. So
Yeah.
he in and of himself had an off day, but you look at Dylan Brooks, who, except for a late in the shot clock kind of, all right, I'll heave one up because I got to. Oh, finally it banked in. 2-point effort out of him, right? But this was kind of a referendum on you can't just rely on two guards on the international stages here because look at the players who were beaten up on them down low, right?
Yeah.
They were guys who are not on NBA rosters, have not been drafted, have not fizzled out of the league and then gone and played back home in Europe. Like these are guys who played in domestic leagues. And it's one of those things where it kind of shows the importance of programs like the CEBL, where you need strong domestic leagues, and that has
Yeah.
been missing in Canada for so many years, because not just when it comes time for the Olympics, but qualifying for the Olympics and all the little sub qualifications that you got to go down to, whatever, Honduras in the middle of the NBA season. Like, you need bodies for these
Yeah.
events. And no more than in this game against France did we realize, not having Andrew Wiggins and Zach Edey, for reasons beyond, Basketball Canada's control,
Yeah.
really hurt them with our lack of size, because they just got bullied on the interior all game long.
Yeah. And not just that. I mean, you hit the nail on the head when you talk about depth, because I mean, you look at the total number of NBA players that Canada had, and yes, it's impressive when you look at it from A to Z. But then you kind of look at, okay, a lot of the more athletic players that really could have helped in a game like, today against France, like the Benedict Mathurin or a Shadon Sharp, like those are two players that really could have made a difference. And again, we're not making excuses, because this is why Canada lost against a team like France. You lost because you weren't prepared from A to Z. Yes, you came out, you dominated in your group play, right? 3-0. Three of the teams in your group ended up advancing because of how competitive it was. You looked really,
It
really,
was the
really
group
on.
of death. We called it from the beginning.
Because you looked on point from the get-go. And I mean, if you could take anything away from it, we're talking negatively, but I mean, there's three really shining examples of, players who were really kind of stepping up their game, even though they're already kind of at the top of their game already. I mean, Captain Canada, I think we can, reassociate the Captain Canada moniker for Canada basketball with our boy SGA. I mean, he was just dialed in from start to finish. RJ Barrett. I mean, RJ Barrett was phenomenal from game one to today. He literally was one of the more consistent players in the tournament, let alone for Canada. And then Lou Dort, like, if you don't like the way that Lou Dort plays basketball, you don't like basketball. The guy is just a blood and guts contender for every single ball. He's diving on the floor. He's tipping passes away. He's making timely shots when he's given the opportunity. He really is the unsung hero of that Canadian team. So, I mean, you look at the performance of those three guys, that's what really carried the team forward and into this position. And I mean, you look at kind of where the seedings ended up after the round robin play. As soon as they landed on France, I was like, that's not a good matchup for them.
No.
Because you look at the size that France has, and you take out Wemby and Gobert, because Gobert is really a non-factor. And I mean, he is the most overrated, overpaid player across any country. So again, if you want to look at where success lies, the French national team succeeded today against a very strong Canada team without Rudy Gobert. So Minnesota, take heed of that and make sure that you're playing your cards appropriately for the next few postseasons. But I digress. If you look at where
this is not a referendum on Timberwolves postseason utility right
now. But again, you look at kind of where the other matchups slotted in. And I mean, you look at a team like Serbia, who you've got arguably the best player in the world with Nikola Jokic, who again put the team on his back and brought his team back against Brazil from 24 down. So you almost had two games in the same day where you're 20 points down and you have a comeback to win. But I mean, that's what the top players do. They put the team on their back. They end up getting the ball in the net one way or another, whether they're scoring it, whether they're assisting on it. That's what they do. I mean, the States, they rolled today. I mean, I think you kind of look at the other matchups as being that's who we kind of expected to advance. Canada, France was really the one where it could have gone either way.
Mm-hmm.
France is a really good team perennially. Canada is now the new kid on the block who, again, look really good in round robin play. So I'm not surprised that they did lose to a very, very good French team. Am I disappointed? Absolutely, because I had really high expectations coming out of that group play, thinking that, what, they've got their confidence in now. They beat three really, really, really good teams. And yeah, here we are. We're sitting here talking about the loss.
Yeah, I think that group play was a little bit of a false negative there, in the sense that if you just look at it, and if you're kind of a casual fan who is maybe just watching highlights or whatever, and here's the 30-second synopsis of it on SportsCenter the next day, you think, 3-0, we're a top of group of death, like we're a team of destiny here, right? But unlike the US and, some of these other teams that were going out there and absolutely taking the boots to some of these teams, Canada was winning kind of ugly basketball there, right? And every single one of their games was kind of at certain junctures of the game could have gone either way. So although they were 3-0, they were not the dominating force that their record kind of leads you to believe that they would have been, right? So they were definitely susceptible to being upset a little bit. Did refereeing play a factor? Yes. Did it play as large of a factor in it as some of the headlines tomorrow will probably have you believe? Absolutely not, right? That's just
No.
FIBA basketball, and a lot of the things that you can even say, like, oh, well, why was this a foul, but that wasn't? Why did Fournier's bucket count, but then we were shooting free throws? It's like, there's different rules in FIBA than there are in the NBA, which is what we have gotten so used to in North America that it's almost jarring, right? It's like if Team Canada went and played hockey and all of a sudden there was no offside calls. You'd be like, what in the world is good? Like, this isn't hockey, it's a conspiracy, right? Yeah. But this is just where they're at right now. And so, yeah, they kind of got dealt a crummy hand in terms of Edie and Wiggins not being available because of their NBA contract situations, and
those darn contracts,
those multi-million-dollar contracts, those pesky little things. But I mean, outside of that, you can kind of nitpick in terms of Jordy Fernandez's deployment of SGA, where guess what? FIBA, they let a lot more go. That's a lot more physical game than you get in the NBA, where there's a lot of ticky-tack and, special star player whistles get kind of busted out from time to time. So
weird.
Yeah, playing 35 minutes in FIBA is not even close to the same as 35 minutes in the NBA, right? So I think you kind of saw the over-reliance on SGA to really carry this team kind of rear its ugly head, because he did have some stretches there where he just looked gassed, right? And when you're only getting, putting Murray aside, who's ostensibly a starter anyways, and, had a crappy shooting day himself, you only got 9 points combined off your bench. That's just not going to cut it at any level that you're playing at right there. So this is not this person let the team down or this person caused the loss. It was just a collective flat performance. And in a single elimination game, like the Olympics, once you get to the quarterfinals, you can't afford to be flat. So I think although we really featured an NBA heavy roster, that depth really wasn't there, right? You had some serviceable role players who could go out there and do one or two things particularly well, but you didn't have a ton of scorers on this team beyond SGA and Murray. So if you subtract Murray and hey, he's shooting 3 for 13, you're kind of in a world of trouble in terms of staying competitive in a FIBA-esque environment there. So like you were saying, it's disappointing for sure on the men's side. I really feel for the women's 3-on-3 team because, overtime loss to Germany, Germany ends up going on and winning the whole thing, right? So that could have gone either way. Again, you want to talk about some dubious officiating, obviously them against the Americans, they probably have a stronger argument than, the men's side does. But I'm most concerned about the women's program here. To go out and, all right, you didn't win a medal. Guess what? There are some really strong teams out there.
It happens.
To not win a game, that is something that I think, Basketball Canada really needs to take a long, hard look in the mirror and say, what are we doing with this program and what's the roadmap out of here?
And not even not winning a game, they weren't even competitive. That's, I think, the most concerning issue is that you look at where they were competing against some of these, not even upper echelon teams. They're kind of, late, 8, 9, 10 ranked in the world. So not, nothing really too crazy. They're getting beat by 20 points. And I didn't watch a lot of the games. Obviously, with the time differences of work schedules, it's very difficult to follow every single, event. But the games that I did catch, or the moments of the games that I did catch, it just looked listless. There was no jump, there was no electricity coming out of that team whatsoever. So I don't know if there needs to be a philosophy change from the coaching perspective, or like you're saying, a full evaluation needs to be looked at of where are we kind of getting our players from? Are we relying too heavily on certain aspects of where we're getting our players, or should we focus more of the what they might be more of the plucky the plucky side of things, but should we get more university players?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is that what kind of reinvigorates this team? Because the way that they looked at these Paris games didn't really look indicative of how competitive they've been on the national or on the international scene for the last 15, 20 years.
Yeah. And
So
I think you kind of are seeing a team that's caught between two eras right now,
yeah,
right? You've kind of
100%.
got that Kia Nurse crew, Natalie Achonwa, who ostensibly retired from international basketball after their elimination there as well, too. And then you've got like we were talking about a few episodes ago, Silas Ords out of Sudbury, youngest Canadian to ever represent, Canada basketball. And so you're kind of stuck between this youth movement and veterans. And I don't know about you, but outside of like USA basketball, when they're marching out like Kobe and co to groom LeBron and them coming in, when you try to merge eras, that's usually the recipe for disaster. I've not seen a
Yeah,
ton of great examples of youth movement and the old elder statesmen coming in and working perfectly together, because
yeah,
when you try and get speed and tempo and that youthful exuberance mixing with like grizzled vets and maybe slower paced half court style offense, you just look disjointed. And it
yeah,
was perfectly encapsulated in their performance in Paris. So they just look disjointed in multiple
yeah,
facets there, right?
yeah,
Is it something in terms of we need to blow everything up and completely change things? I don't know if it's that extreme, but it's certainly more extreme than somewhere in the middle. Like I would lean more towards the blow it up side than I would let's stay the course. These seeds we're planting now will turn into something later, right? Like,
yeah,
and we just talked about on the men's side the importance of a domestic league. Well, guess what? Let's call it what it is. On the men's side, even if there isn't a domestic league, these guys are finding places to play over in Turkey,
yeah,
over in Greece, over in Spain, right?
yep,
Those same opportunities don't exist to the same degree on the women's side, which is also why, like, even in the WNBA up until this year, which, I think Brittany Griner's situation kind of really put a spotlight on, this probably won't be the norm moving forward anymore here. But you had these women needing to go and find all these leagues overseas, right?
yeah,
If you are serious about really growing the game on the women's side, it's the same thing as, the PWHL. Like, you need a domestic product that can then feed into the WNBA. You can feed into some of these other associations that ultimately help your Olympic team, and it grooms that, not, starter on your Olympic squad, but someone who could vie for,
yeah,
like that Kem Birch or, Elgims or like any of these guys who are kind of fringe players. Maybe they dabbled in a pro league here or there, but they're not NBA starters, and they still made the Olympic team on the men's side there. So you need something that's reinforcing, that classic pyramid there, right? If your
yeah,
base is kind of wonky, you're not going to have a high
yeah,
performing pinnacle there, and that's just common sense regardless of what sport it is.
yeah. I mean, I'll kind of summarize what you're saying with two cliche sayings, right? You got to start with a foundation. Bottom line, you got to build the foundation before you build anything else. And then two, iron sharpens iron.
No.
If you've got a domestic league like you're saying, and you have these top level players in the same country who are now competing not only for jobs, but they're competing for spots on their respective Olympic teams, that's going to make people better,
Yeah.
right? That's going to, develop things into a system where now you've got these large pools of players to pick from. We spoke to it, a couple episodes ago when we had Ken McKenzie on. You look at kind of where the hockey development system is right now. For all of hockey's flaws, the one thing I do think that they have right is kind of where they have these developmental systems,
Mhm.
right? Like the U.S. National Developmental Team, Canada is now starting their own kind of the developmental league as well. That's where you really see a lot of these players kind of progress together, right? they build that camaraderie, they build the skill set, and they actually build a cohesiveness amongst each other that shows on the international level.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where you're seeing a lot of these programs. We just talked about France, but like you're talking about the Greases of the world, the Australias of the world. Like they have these things internally where they've got these, these leagues where all these players are going to play and they're playing together.
Yeah.
So not only are they playing together on the national team, but they're playing together domestically.
Yeah.
So
And I think this is where Canada, this is all right. We're diverting from the Olympics too. We're gonna fix sports on this episode, but it's really is. I think Canada follows the American model way too closely in terms of how they develop athletes. And that's fine when you've got a pool as big as 300 plus million people to pick from. When
yeah.
you're in the 1/10 of that, in the 30 millions, maybe we've eclipsed 40 million. I haven't checked the latest Census Bureau statistics there, but like it just doesn't work that way. And that's why some of these smaller countries that have the academy development models are starting to close that gap on us. And it really is something that I think Basketball Canada needs to start getting a handle on, is that what is happening at the grassroots level ultimately affects what happens at the absolute top of the pyramid. And I think we've kind of got our rose-colored glasses on a little bit because we've had this run of, hey, look at these Canadians that all kind of just made the NBA, and RJ went, number 3, and Zach Edey just got drafted, and we're doing all right. But okay, but if you're only adding one, maybe 2 players to this pool per year, whereas some of these other countries are adding 3, 4, like you compound this over time. And that's how all of a sudden the Australias of the world, and like you were saying, the Greases and the Frances and this, that, the other, are ultimately going to pass us. And, you can't sit there with a smile on your face and say, Germany is the epicenter of basketball in the world, but they just won the World Cup. They're they're through to the semifinals. They're doing something right because they have actually shifted to that academy model. And this is where, they've got a handful of NBA players on that team, but most of them are just domestic players. And so you need to reinforce these things if you want to actually succeed and compete with the LeBron Jameses of the world and whatnot, and actually go head to head with the big boys on the international level.
Yeah. It's almost like throwing hammers at a field, right? And just seeing where they land.
Yeah. If anything, that hammer throw league domestically is clearly doing well.
But yeah, I mean, we're talking about all these things with the basketball side being all gloom and doom. But let's get a golf clap for our hammer throw gold medal winners on the men's and women's side. I mean, what a performance on each side. Obviously, this is a sport that has really taken off in Canada and is showing on the international level because 2 gold medals to show for it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so, tying both what we were saying together there, I think both Ethan and Cameron need to get together and start their own academy out there, and then they can develop that next wave of hammer throwers. And
they need to contact Kyle at Dine Sports, and he'll start up a hammer throw league across Canada.
Yeah. But I mean, kudos to them. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Full marks, double gold, right? You saw Ethan go out there and win it. And, he talk about a guy who, if you were to pick him off the street, you'd be like, oh, yeah, that's Ethan from the local beer league, right? Like, yeah, he plays in the C division in my men's league hockey there, right?
Yeah.
He goes out there, absolutely dominating performance. And
oh, yeah.
First gold medal in something like 112 years or something like that for Canada. First medal in over 100. And then, a couple days later, suddenly it's, look at that. We did it again, except it's on the women's side now. So
yeah,
I don't know who's running Hammer Throw Canada, but they deserve a pay raise based on what they're putting out there.
Yeah. So any minister of sport that's listening to this, make sure that you're following up with Hammer Throw Canada and giving them their pay bumps, because they definitely need some more money in the coffers to get and groom some more of these high level athletes coming out.
Yeah, absolutely too. And I don't think there's a better sport post-game interview than hammer throw people, because both of them, both Cameron and Ethan, gave some really just frank, like salt of the earth, like,
yeah,
ah, shucks, just went out there and tossed some stuff around and they gave me this shiny thing. Oh, great. Right. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
just phenomenal, phenomenal performances on the biggest stage of them all. And, I can't give them enough props there for what they were able to do over in Paris.
absolutely. And I think again, we'll get a double golf clap because we'll get one for each. Congratulations. We got a back-to-back gold medal winner on the women's side and a new star on the men's side out of this. So great to see. And again, anytime you can see kind of these obscure sports get a little bit of light shone on them and a little bit of love paid towards them, it's always a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And you never know, all it takes is, some kid watching these Olympics and, hey, I want to go down to the track and field club and try this.
Yeah.
Right? I think I would be really good at it. And I recently had someone who, in my life decided, I'm going to take up pole vaulting. And this was before all the, but below the waist knocked it off the measuring and all of that went viral. They just happened to take it up this
Good
summer.
for him, though. Good for
Yeah.
him. If you're gonna go out, that's the way you want to go out.
I think Haynes or Viagra or something like that is going to be giving him a little call in the future to be a spokesperson there.
gives a new term to pole vaulting.
Yeah. Well, in an effort not to get canceled on episode 31, let's move over to the CFL here, bud. Oh, Tre Ford, non-Viagra sponsored athlete. Though you wouldn't know it based on how he was performing in his first start, goes and knocks off Saskatchewan in Saskatchewan. And who was it that kind of queued that up there? Oh, it might have been your friends, Kyle and Kyle from the 1807 Sports Show. People just need to listen to us, I think, more.
Can we just get more people listening to what we have to say? Because honestly, how many things that we have talked about on this show have come true? We forecasted it and it's come true. Anyone who's watched Tre Ford play knows that he's capable of this every single time he takes the field. Am I surprised they beat Saskatchewan in Saskatchewan? No. Why? Because Tre Ford brings a dynamic to the football field that no other quarterback in the CFL right now possesses. Maybe Vernon Adams, but that's even stretching it, right? So, yeah, congrats to Tre. I mean, he's a phenomenal player. He's handled this whole situation with so much class and with so much dignity. This really makes him look even better, right? Because not only did he come out, he didn't whine, didn't complain, didn't go to the media. He said, "You know what? I'm learning from one of the best veterans to play the game in the last 10 years. He's going to be beneficial for my development and growth." All the right things do you want to hear a young quarterback say. Then he comes out when he's given the opportunity, second half of a game, lights it up. All right, well, we got a new regime in charge. Let's give him, a little bit more of a run. We'll start him against the best defense in the CFL so far. And what does he do? He puts up over 40 points and just absolutely looks phenomenal, right? So, again, am I surprised? Absolutely not. Should anyone be surprised? No, because this is what he's capable of doing. Is he going to have a bad game here and there? Yeah, everybody does. But would you not want to take a chance on a lottery ticket like that, knowing that he could put up 40-plus points against a top-level defense? Yeah. Especially, look at how much room him being out there made for their run game. Right? I mean, was it Leak? Is it a running back, Javon Leak? No one knows who this guy is, and he just ran for 130 yards against the league's top rushing defense.
Yeah.
Are you going to hear about Javon Leak if McLeod Bethel Thompson's still kind of plodding around in the backfield? Probably not.
Yeah.
So
it's very reminiscent to, like, if you're going to do NFL comparables here, like it would be the equivalent of, who do you want there? Do you want Lamar Jackson or do you want Kirk Cousins? Right? Like, Kirk Cousins probably has a safer floor when he's healthy, right? But is he going to be a game breaker? No. Is he going to go out there and win MVP? No. Right? Like, I think if you ask every NFL front office, like, putting aside injury history and age, just like skill set alone, what they bring to the table, every single one of them would choose Lamar Jackson. So, like we were saying, it would be interesting to know, or to have been a fly in the room in terms of when that decision to go with MBT was ultimately made, right? How
Mhm.
much of that was truly football related and how much of it had to do with the fact that this is a team that is trying to complete a sale, right?
Yeah.
I think the initial knee jerk reaction of, all right, well, we're going to throw the veteran out there was, all right, if we can just hover around 500 and get this sale across the finish line, that's great because we don't want to go 0-7 to start the year. And then suddenly
Yeah.
someone gets scared off because it's like, what the heck is this piece of crap, team that you're trotting out there?
Yeah.
I think the smart football play has always been Tre Ford was who you want under center if you're actually trying to go out there and reset a culture, build a winning mentality for a team that has been abysmal. Like we harp on the Red Blacks all the time as far as what the fans have been through for the last couple of years. Like copy and paste just out on a little bit more west there.
Copy and paste of green and gold. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So it would be interesting to have known how much of the off-field stuff kind of ultimately played into that. But as soon as Chris Jones was ultimately let go there, the writing was on the wall. You have to go with the guy, even if they had have been kind of competitive, 2-5 or 3-4 or something. Like the change
Yeah.
still needed to get made. One of these guys can get you through with a pretty safe floor and won't lose you games, but probably won't win you too many on his own either. And the
Yeah.
other one is, well, this could be the face of the CFL, for the next couple of years here.
Yeah. No, again, I think we've talked a lot about Tre Ford on this show. We talked a lot about Edmonton on this show. And every time we do, I think we always hit on the same point. If you want the chance to do something special, you put Tre Ford in the field. If you want an opportunity to just go through the same motions that CFL offenses have gone through for the last 10 years, you go with a safer bet with McLeod Bethel Thompson. But now, is McLeod Bethel Thompson a safer bet? I would say no, because what he showed with the same talent around him ultimately wasn't that impressive. His touchdown to interception ratio was not good. He's throwing for, maybe 275, 300 yards a game, which is good. But if you're not winning games, what does it matter?
Yeah, you're usually throwing a whole lot when you're losing games, right?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. So, again, to all the detractors out there that didn't think Tre Ford was worthy of starting in the CFL, guess what, guys? This guy's here to stay. And if Edmonton knows what they're doing and plays their cards right, they will lock him up long term and he will be the face of their franchise for the next 10 years.
mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And, I think kind of putting a bow on this here, right? You just read his stat line 18 for 22, 252 yards, two TDs, one INT, five rushes for 46 yards on the ground. And again, had a few of those just jaw dropping plays as far as like, there's a 5-yard sack. Oh, no, there he goes, scampering off. And then he hits a receiver in stride. Like these are things that at this stage of his career, Bethel Thompson just cannot bring to the table, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's the smart move to go with him. And again, you want to talk about faces of the league. Like, there's kind of that void since Nathan Rourke left, who we'll talk about in a second here. But like, here is someone who could seamlessly step in. And now that we've got something here, maybe that looks a little bit more attractive to a prospective buyer. Like playing it safe from the beginning never made sense to me. And I think now they might actually realize like, where would we be in that sale process had Tre Ford been the starter and the talk of the entire league for multiple weeks of the season at this point?
Yeah. They probably would be sold by now. They probably have, a firm grip on who is going to be leading this franchise for the next 25 years. But here we are. We're talking about it again on episode number 31. And yeah, you mentioned Nathan Rourke. But before we move on to Nathan Rourke, I just want to give a shout out to my buddy Dominic Davis, who just signed with the Montreal Alouettes. Obviously, they've had some injuries at quarterback, and couldn't think of a better guy to bring in to kind of right the ship when you're kind of treading water with some young guys. So Dom, congrats, man. Hope you go in and do well. But let's get a golf clap for my man Dom Davis before we get into the again quarterback pièce de resistance of every Canadian's heart.
Yeah. Well, at a certain point here, right? Are we gonna get sick of and tired of the will he, won't he? Oh, he's batting his eyelashes at us. Last call just got announced at the bar. Tonight could be the night, right? Like, obviously, for those who haven't heard, Nathan Rourke gets released by the Giants. Suddenly, every CFL front office is on red alert. Oh, will he come back? And he goes and promptly joins the Atlanta Falcons there. Now, for those who don't know, the aforementioned Kirk Cousins is making all sorts of references in this episode for some reason. Uh, Kirk Cousins and a little someone named Mr. Michael Penix Jr., who they just shocked the world by taking 8th overall in this year's NFL draft, are already there. So, in the best case scenario, third on the depth chart, he's not going there to legitimately vie for a starting NFL job. So, before I put on, because I've got a whole conspiracy theory, Kyle, a little rabbit hole, I can get my tinfoil hat on and take us down. What was your reaction to him signing with the Falcons?
First of all, what are the Giants doing?
Well, that's a great question to begin with here, and is probably worthy of its own episode in and of itself.
Yeah, because has one team looked worse being on a show like Hard Knocks, where you've kind of been behind the scenes? Has a team ever looked worse from a front office perspective than the Giants have?
What was it? The Hugh Jackson season?
Well,
There, that was pretty bad.
that was bad. You're right, but be that as it may, you look at how the Giants have kind of handled their offseason. And I mean, you look at kind of where things were when they got the whole new regime change with Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, who took over. It kind of started well. And now they're in a position where they're making all these really bizarre decisions. And I look back at when they claimed him from New England, right? New England's kind of in that position where, yeah, we just drafted 2 rookie quarterbacks. You kind of saw the writing on the wall for Nathan Rourke, like not really a spot to fit there. That's okay. I understand that. But you go to a team like the Giants, and when you make a claim for a player like Nathan Rourke, who's shown that he can compete at the NFL level, given his preseason last season with Jacksonville, this guy can actually make some plays. We just talked about Tre Ford being able to make plays and bring a different dynamic to your offense. Nathan Rourke is that type of player. When you look at where the Giants are right now, why would you not want to give that man every single opportunity? But again, you're hyping up the local product and Tommy DeVito. You're hyping up Daniel Jones, who has this, again, who would have thought he would have had this contract in his career?
Certainly not Daniel Jones.
No. And I mean, Drew Lock is the other guy there. So Drew Lock has had opportunities. He's looked okay, but he's not, the savior of a franchise. So again, before I get into Atlanta, I just have to say, the Giants are just mismanaging this whole situation so much, because they could have been such a beacon of light for Nathan Rourke, and he could have been a beacon of light for them. But here we are. I don't get the Atlanta
stern dad look to the New York Giants is what you're saying.
Stern dad look to the New York Giants front office, because what are you doing? But I mean, Raheem Morris has come out and said, "Oh, we love Nathan Rourke. We put a claim in for him when he was released by the Patriots, but ultimately the Giants got him ahead of us." But again, you just mentioned it. I don't get the fit. You're bringing him in to essentially be a training camp arm, bringing him in to potentially hold a clipboard for the entire season unless someone gets hurt, right? And even then, a second person will have to get hurt, because you're not going to play him over the first round quarterback you just took. So, yeah, I don't understand it. I mean, good for him. He just signed a $1 million contract to be a third string quarterback. So we got to give him, props for doing that, because that's more than he would make in the CFL. But we've talked about it before. At what point do you miss the compete? Right? At what point do you miss having the ball in your hand and the game in your control? So yeah, it's a battle of two things: money versus, playing time. So are you there for the money? And if you get enough of it, are you going to come back, or are you just longing for, again, the ball to be in your hands to make plays, and you'll take a little bit of a pay cut to do so? That's the ever burning question with a lot of these quarterbacks. So I don't really see him being long for Atlanta.
Mhm.
So again, is it going to happen at the end of training camp? Is it going to happen midway through the season? Practice rosters are expanded now, so maybe he'll stick around. But yeah, I mean, I think if he gets released again, you're probably not going to see him on an NFL roster for the next year or two. He'll probably end up having to come back to the CFL because, again, if you're getting released by 4 or 5 NFL teams, maybe beauty's in the eye of the beholder. You need to put more, game film together and get your stock up a little bit more.
Yeah. And, I think there's probably a segment of even CFL fans here who are getting a little bit tired of the song and dance, right? Because, again, if he were to come back to the CFL, every front office is at least making a phone call on him, regardless of who's under center currently, right? Quarterback driven league, yada yada. We've heard all of the narratives there, but the fact that he's a homegrown talent, the fact that he had that explosive season out on the West Coast there, it's very much a, oh well, what could he do now that he has been up against NFL teams and learning from ostensibly some of the best coaches out there and this, that, the other. The other thing that has come across my radar, and at first I was like, that's again stupid fan theory here, right? But then I started thinking about it, and I'm like, maybe 10% of it is playing a factor, right? We obviously laid out the money. The money is probably the larger factor at play here, but
Yeah.
there was this one fan theory stumbled across here, and definitely not a verified user account or anything like that on the social media when I first came across it, but essentially is saying that Nathan Rourke is holding on just long enough to qualify for the NFL pension and then will make his return back north of the border. Right. For those that don't know, NFL pension, you need to, in order to qualify, and it's obviously based on years of seniority here, right? But he's already got the 1 year under his belt. You need 3 seasons at a minimum to qualify for the pension. So this song and dance could go on for one more year before we see him come back if
Yeah.
he's not outright released by everyone, which, like you were saying, I kind of see the writing on the wall that, once they go to finalize that roster, the scissors might be coming out for our friend there. But right now, the other hurdle he needs to cut across is at some point in his career, he needs to appear on the active roster for a minimum of 3 games. In his rookie year in Jacksonville, twice he was called up and activated. So we had October 18th and December 9th, immediately sent back down to the practice squad afterwards. However, he has dressed for 2 games. So if you were sitting there thinking, all I need to do is just be activated one more time and then just hang on a practice roster for one more season and I qualify for a pension, while also probably making some pretty good coin as well too.
Yeah.
You know, that's probably playing a small degree, or someone in his inner circle has probably floated that scenario out there to him at this point. And if there's one person who is potentially going to go down due to injury under center, it's the guy coming off of an Achilles injury who again is a little bit long in the tooth himself there, has shown a propensity to not heal up that fast and probably play even when he shouldn't play, so pushing his body even more than he should. It's Kirk Cousins, right? So maybe there is that little part of him that's saying, you know what, Atlanta, I know it's a logjam right now, but I look around the league here and hey, if Kirk goes down, I don't know. Maybe they do want to actually have a full red shirt season for Michael Penix Jr. And maybe I do not only get activated, but I might actually take some snaps at the NFL level as well.
Yeah. And that's definitely a possibility. Again, don't be wrong. Like, I'm very high in a skill set, like I've mentioned many times. Would that surprise me if that happened? Absolutely not. But I think it's more of the former with your conspiracy theory that it's pension related. Because again, that makes a lot of sense as to why you'd hold on for that long. Because again, I think Nathan Rourke is a competitor. I think he enjoys, again, the thrill of the chase, which is you're putting your pads on in order to use them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. And again, it's smart in his mind because you're making money, you're not beating up your body, and ultimately you're going to be set very comfortably for the rest of your life once that pension kicks in.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I I wouldn't doubt it if that's the case. So I think that's probably more of the case than, oh, well, maybe he's holding on in the event that someone gets hurt, because again, it's horseshoes and hand grenades, man. It's all luck.
Yeah.
So someone can get hurt. Look at Aaron Rodgers last year, you know, took one snap before he ultimately dropped back and hurt himself. So that's really the chance you take whenever you're an NFL player, whenever you're a football player. Someone can get hurt today walking their dog, right? Like, it happens. So again, you don't want anyone to get hurt, but when you do have an opportunity due to an injury, you got to make it count. So if that does happen, I hope that Nathan is ready to show the world what he's got again. But yeah, like I said, I want to see him play. Like, that's just me selfish, selfish saying that. I just want to see him play because the short sample size we have of him from the CFL is so amazing that you want more of it. And even if it's at the NFL level, like, I want to see how much action he gets in the preseason, because he showed that he belongs there and he's a great competitor. So selfishly, I just want to see him play. I don't care where he is, how much money he's making, whether he's a starter or whatever. I just want to see him on the field. So that's
I think a lot of fans fall into that camp as well too, and that's why it's so frustrating with the perennial. Okay, there's a chance. Is he coming north? Is he going south? Oh, someone claimed him. Shucks, back to the drawing board here.
Yeah. So I mean, hopefully Nathan, is seeing the field sooner rather than later. But yeah, like I said, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well, we're approaching the halfway point of the CFL season here, and got a good sample size now as far as what these teams really are, right? And I think we started, before the season, we kind of loosely power ranked who we thought was going to be there. We figured, all right, now's a good time. Let's power rank them 1 through 9 based on what you've seen so far. Now, do you want to go first, or you want me to give you my list here first?
Give me your list first.
All right. Well, we'll see how many of us we're in agreement on here. So, starting off, number 1, the team with the best record in the league, right? Montreal Alouettes, defending Grey Cup champions. They've looked every bit the part. I think a lot of people were wondering, okay, was it kind of a fluke that they won and they're going to have sort of that championship hangover, or is this the team that they are? And through the first 8 games of the season for them, they have shown every bit that this is the club who, hoisted the championship trophy last season. So I've got them number 1. Do you have anyone else number 1, or?
Nope, we're right in line with you in Montreal. And again, knowing a couple of people in their front office and knowing how they operate, not surprising at all. They put a lot of work in developing that roster, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're going to be on top for a long time, considering how young their team is. And yeah, like I said, they've got a good group there for sure.
Yeah. Now, this is where I think everything can kind of start getting a little squirrely here, because you've got a lot of teams that have shown flashes, and then they've also shown like, you lost to the or the Elks at home there.
You almost did it. You almost
did it. I caught myself. So, number 2, I flip-flopped between 2 teams, but I think in my mind, at least, it's the Owls are at the top of the league, and then we're going out west for a couple teams here. So I had the BC Lions, who are currently 5-3. Now, I'm going to put a little asterisk next to them at number 2, because again, they've said, all right, he's week to week, the Vernon Adams injury, but when it happened, didn't look good. The fact that they had to cart him out of the stadium also didn't look good. So is week to week really just, okay, well, he'll maybe miss a start or a couple of practices and then he's back? Or is week to week like 6 weeks from now, he finally gets back into meaningful game action?
Yeah, I think that's definitely coach speak for he's going to be out for a long time. And we're just kind of softening the blow with our fan base to make it so that they're not going to panic. But yeah, I have BC second as well. I think that they have a very talented, well-rounded roster. Again, I'm wearing, my garb for a reason. I'm very high on them, as we both picked them out of the West to represent the in the Grey Cup. But yeah, like I said, they're only going to go as far as Vernon Adams takes them. So if he's going to be out for the next 10 weeks, that's going to be a long grind for them. But they're talented enough to make it. They are talented enough to make it without him. It's just, it makes it so much easier when you've got your quarterback rolling on all cylinders. And before he got hurt, that's exactly what Vernon Adams was doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see how that ultimately plays out. But again, very talented team beyond just
Yeah.
Vernon Adams, obviously. But we'll see how long he's out and what they look like if they do have to go a few weeks with Plan B under center there. But Rough Riders, I then had them third.
Yep.
Again, I think there was maybe an argument to be made as far as they could have been second. Then they kind of laid a little bit of a stinker against Tre Ford and company there. So I ended up bumping them down. They're 5-3, right? But their defense is absolutely solid. They are looking like that kind of playoff built team, right? Defense wins championships and all those old cliches and whatnot. They do have a few warts, and in their losses, they've kind of gone dry on offense for large stretches of the game, and then all of a sudden go into catch up mode and kind of make it quasi competitive. But those are the types of things that, even going back to what we were talking about with Canada versus France, your offense can't stall out for long stretches if you are going to be a championship winning team. So that's kind of my concern with them there. But ultimately, I still think that them and BC, it's going to be kind of neck and neck for who comes out of the West. And right now, I give the edge to BC. But if Vernon Adams is out for an extended period, I can easily flip flop those two.
Yeah. And, in Saskatchewan's defense, they are getting Trevor Harris back this week. So that could be a big difference for their offense and provide them a boost. But yeah, I mean, be that as it may, I just got to give a shout out to Corey Mace for the job he's done in his first year at the helm there, because, talk about a listless franchise for a number of years under Craig Dickinson. Like, they look like a completely different franchise now that Corey there. So for anyone who says that coaching doesn't make a difference, just look at Saskatchewan and you will absolutely think otherwise. So yeah, I had them at 3 as well. They're neck and neck. I probably would have had them at 2, to be honest with you, had they not lost that game to Edmonton. But yeah, like I said, they're right neck and neck with BC in my mind as well.
Yeah. All right. So we're in lockstep through 3 here. We'll see if you're going to follow me. I'm going Homer pick here. Red Blacks, number 4, 5-2. I mean, you know what? Putting aside the fact that I live in Ottawa and, a little bit of fandom aside there, I think all of the things that I highlighted when we were kind of doing our CFL preview show, as far as these are the questions I have about this team,
Yeah.
we've largely answered them to this
Yep.
point, right? And injuries notwithstanding here, they've very much, all the players who they thought were going to play big roles on this team have lived up to that. And they've even gotten some surprise contributions, like a Pimpleton emerging as, kind of the Tyreek Hill of the CFL, just with that blazing speed.
Yeah.
And so I think they are very much a frisky team that you can match them up against anyone, and they have a chance of winning. It's probably going to be ugly. They're certainly not playing. I think even the most diehard of Red Blacks fan, and probably even Bob Dice himself, would say they're not playing very pretty football. But I think that's kind of the mentality that they're actually trying to cultivate there. Whereas, the Bank Street Bullies and all of those little, like, we're trying to create this, you come into our house, it's a tough place to play, which, for anyone who's been following the Red Blacks or the CFL, TD Place has literally been TD Place for any offense that came into play against the Red Blacks in recent years. So I've got them. I'm giving them full marks, 5-2, coming off another bye, seeing as they had the week 1 bye there. So ostensibly they're going to be a little bit healthier and getting some bodies back. So a fairly minimal injury report that they just released today as well too. So I'm very, very pleased with where they are, because I had my doubts coming into this season that, all right, is it just going to be the same old RB or is it going to be a whole new era in town?
I again, we're pretty much lock stock here. I had Ottawa number 4 as well. They've looked great, and again, that takes a lot to say because the standard's been very, very low since 2018. So, yeah, we've talked about Drew Brown. He's come in and been kind of exactly what everyone expected him to be, which is the new quarterback on the scene. He's looked great. He can lead a team. He's, saying all the right things in the media. He's exactly the type of quarterback that I think bonds well with the Ottawa market. And yeah, their defense is flying around making plays. Their special teams is doing what they do always. Because again, a Bob Dice team is going to have a good special teams unit, regardless of how good they are. So yeah, I mean, I love it for the city of Ottawa. They've deserved a team to be this competitive for a long time. Let's hope that they can stay competitive and keep up with Montreal and kind of put some pressure on them for first in the East.
There we go. All right, number 5, I've got the Argos at 4-4 here. The fact that, again, you might as well just take some of the things that we say and just chisel them into stone, because they're going to happen. Because, like
Yep.
you were highlighting, we're quickly entering Chad Kelly era, and guess what? Right around 500, where if you can just keep the ship steady, and then, well, anything can happen from there. You couldn't have, I mean, you could have gone 8-0, but I don't think there was too many Argos fans who were expecting that. But you couldn't have drawn up a more, this is going according to script, as far as what I think realistically that Argos front office was kind of hoping for, given
Yeah.
the length and the severity of the Kelly suspension. Putting aside, what he did, we already kind of covered all of that on a previous episode. From a strictly football standpoint, when he does come back, this is going to be a very, very strong team. And I think it's going to be a team that, kudos to Ottawa for building up kind of that lead that they've got, because I can see that lead shrinking and that battle for second place in the East getting real tight down the home stretch there in the CFL.
I had the vaunted tie for the fifth spot. So I had Toronto and Calgary neck and neck for this position. But yeah, I mean, if I had to give an edge to somebody, it would probably be Toronto as well. Yeah, we mentioned it before. CFL preview show. They just need to tread water. Cameron Dukes, again, young quarterback, first foray in the CFL. He's giving you some flashes of what he can do, but he's going to have some rocky starts. That's exactly what's happened. So, again, they're a good enough team where as long as they can get into the playoffs, they'll be competitive, and they're going to be a hell of an out for whoever they play against. So, I like what they've done. I kind of see them, trending upwards now that they're getting some people back. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they do make a run. And again, the fact that Ottawa's got a little bit of a cushion now with they've got a 2-point lead, but we've all seen the CFL that can evaporate very quickly. So let's see where things net out over the next month, and we'll kind of reevaluating this conversation at that point.
There you go. So we're lock, stock, and barrel here through 5. But as you just kind of tipped your hand, we finally have our first difference here. So I've actually got the 3-6 Blue Bombers ahead of the 4-4 Stampeders. Again, I think this is a team who started off tremendously slow, like shockingly so, even to the Bomber faithful there. I don't think they saw them coming winless out of the gates there, but they've obviously steadied the ship in recent games there. Again, 2-2 in their last 4. They took a loss to the aforementioned Argos in overtime, but 25-0 shellacking over BC. Like that, they very much looked the part of the team that it was just pencil them into the Grey Cup, every season against BC. And not all of that was just, Vernon Adams was out of the game, right? Like the reason he was out of the game was because they were absolutely decimating the Lions in all 3 aspects of football when they matched up in that 25-0 beatdown there. So I see them turning the corner. This is more so projecting of, all right, I think this team is going to get back to its winning ways rather than whatever that kind of anomaly was at the beginning of the season. And then I've got the Stampeders right behind them, just because, you know what? I just view them as the least sexy 500 team in football right now, where it's not an exciting brand of football to particularly watch. You don't know what you're getting out of Jake Meyer under center from week to week. There's a little bit of a controversy brewing out there as far as, how much longer do we kind of give him as far as a leash before we start looking at other options? And guess what? Had Nathan Rourke become available, I think the Calgary Stampeders were number 1 to here is a blank check. Fill out your name, kind sir.
You read my mind on that one, because that's exactly who I was kind of projecting Nathan Rourke to go to if he comes back, was Calgary, for those exact reasons. And I mean, the reason why I didn't put them ahead of Toronto was because of that. pretty blasé. They're 500 for a reason. They play decent enough ball to win. They don't play exciting enough ball to win constantly.
Yeah.
So if you look at the Winnipeg side of things, I see flashes of that perennial contender, but I'm not seeing them consistently, right? Which is why they're 3-6. You look at a lot of their losses, yes, they're heartbreakers, but when you're one of those top level teams, you're winning those games. They were winning these games 3 years ago, right? And gradually over time, and this is what happens to all dynasties, right? Like Winnipeg has been on the top of the CFL for 5-6 years. This is what happens. You start to deteriorate, player by player, coach by coach, because you outprice yourself, because you're developing these players for these contract extensions. You're developing these coaches who are looking for, a next pay bump. It's hard to keep these teams together. I think Michael Shea's done a fantastic job at keeping that locker room together. I think Kyle Walters has done a fantastic job at bringing in new talent, but I don't think Winnipeg is well suited as they have, or is as well suited as they have been to be that contender again. I mean, maybe they'll prove me wrong down the stretch and they'll play that ball that you're alluding to, but I don't see it. I think that they're struggling in the aspects of the game where you can't struggle in, right? Like, and that's hard to get out of. They're winning games based on certain criteria, but the criteria that they need to have consistently isn't there, which is why you're seeing them kind of be, they look great, but then they don't, right? So we'll see about that. And but yeah, they were next on my list. So just flip-flopping Calgary and Winnipeg, I think we're still kind of on the same track there. So I kind of know where you're going with your 8 and 9 teams here, but I'll pass the floor over to you to finish up.
I'm drinking the Tre Ford Kool-Aid here. I don't care if they've only won one game here. Guess what? They're not the bottom. They've moved out of the cellar here. They're no longer in 9th place. I've got Edmonton 1-7, and then obviously the Ticats at 2-6. I mean, the Ticats to me, they just have all the kind of looks and feels of, guess what? Stick a fork in them. They're probably picking number 1 overall when all is said and done at the end of the season. I mean, even if they were to get a little bit healthier, and obviously injuries have played a factor in their current record, but guess what? Like, I think this roster as currently constructed is pretty flawed, and I think they're kind of at the tail end of their previous era, and they're not quite at the, all right, we've torn away all the pieces that needed to be removed from the previous regime to be on the upswing of their rebuild. So I think it's going to be a very, very busy off season for this franchise. And you're going to see a lot of moving parts, and that could extend all the way to the front office. It could be coaching, could be any number of things with this team, but they have the looks of a team that kind of has accepted their fate, that we're probably finishing last in the East by a comfortable margin this season.
Yeah. I actually had the same 8 and 9, which is why I knew you were going the way you were going. You see Edmonton get that glimmer of hope, right? And all it takes is one little shift, and everything starts to trend upwards. And I think Edmonton's going to play a different brand of football the rest of the season now because of this coaching change, management change, and quarterback change. That's what happens. Change brings good sometimes. So, don't be so hesitant to pull the trigger next time. Now you're looking at Hamilton for every reason that you just mentioned. I mean, they're pretty much all right, let's not get excited about this one on our calendar, because they're going to come in and play the same game that they played all season. If we play decent enough football, we're going to win, right? Like, nothing is really making that Hamilton roster say, Bo Levi Mitchell is the same Bo Levi Mitchell from the Calgary Grey Cup days, where he's going to take the team on his back. I mean, obviously he's getting up there in age. His body is, absolutely beaten up from the years and years and years of hits that he's taken. He can't do that anymore. You need to surround him with more talent. And, I think the one glimmer of hope, and again, this is more of a selfish thing on my perspective, but Hamilton just picked up, a very good friend of mine. His son now plays in the CFL. Deontay Knight was with the Argos. Hamilton picked him up and he's actually been playing very, very well for the Ticats, for the last couple of weeks there. So if anyone's looking for a little glimmer of hope for the Hamilton Tiger Cats, it's Deontay Knight on the defensive line there. So, anyways, that's pretty much the only positive thing I could say about Hamilton at this time.
Yeah. Well, again, and we didn't even coordinate ourselves on these whatsoever. And we were pretty much just in unison, other than Blue Bombers and Stampeders. So, hey, next time it's a Winnipeg Calgary game, we'll have to tune in there and have a friendly pint or wager or something on the outcome. See whose list was more accurate when all is said and done.
100%. 100%. I'm up for it. Let's go.